Myanmar. What do you make of that? I mean, it took Biden an eternity to work out it was a coup, and the fate of the Australian citizen, Professor Sean Turnell, who's a special economic advisor to Suu Kyi. Where's that taking us?
This is another very bad development. Australians don't realise, Alan, how bad our strategic circumstances are becoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the government is right to be cautious and slow in its response to this coup in Myanmar. We're right to condemn it. We're absolutely right to condemn it. But provided the military doesn't start killing large numbers of people, we shouldn't burn up whatever relationship we have with Myanmar, because what will happen if the West totally isolates Myanmar and goes in for widespread sanctions and so on is Myanmar will become a wholly owned subsidiary of China.
Quite.
And it can do a lot of things to hurt the neighbourhood. It's the biggest producer of illegal drugs in the world. It's a big source of illegal immigration across the Thai border. And it's a big assistance to China in signals intelligence because of its geographic position. Well, that's not in our interest, actually. So we really want to keep the military in a dialogue if we can. We're not going to get democracy back probably, but maybe we'll get them, if we can, to behave like the Thai military or to behave like the Indonesian military in the 80s and 90s, where there's a bit of a democratic fig leaf and they observe basic human rights.
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this stuff's everywhere. I mean, you've got the story today about the Australian journalist who's been arrested by Chinese authorities. 6 months she's been in detention and she's been denied access to a lawyer since being taken from her Beijing apartment way back on August 13. She's got an 11-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old son in Melbourne. She's reportedly in a cell with no fresh air, a security guard present at all times. And here we are in a period of terrible relationships with China. What's her fate?
Well, her fate is probably pretty grim. She may have been arrested purely because she's an Australian. That's quite possible. Or there may be other local factors. She may have fallen out with someone. It's almost certain she didn't do anything wrong because the charge against her is so ridiculous that she gave state secrets to foreign entities. Well, just imagine a broadcaster living and working in mainland China on mainline Chinese television. I mean, what kind of idiot would be giving state secrets to a foreign power? It's just ludicrous.
But because it's a state security case, we're told the trial will be closed and the sentences from such cases range from 3 years to life, even the death penalty. She's got 2 kids in Melbourne.
Yeah, no, this is a terrible situation. And the fact that they've come up with such a preposterous charge just shows how brazen and arrogant the Chinese Communist Party has become. It doesn't any longer need a fig leaf of respectability for its actions. We used to have a formal human rights dialogue with Beijing, which it long ago decided it had no interest in. Well, it no longer fears Western public opinion. It couldn't care less. Well, then the Chinese legal system is, it has a 100% conviction rate. And a final thought, Alan, Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop wanted us to ratify an extradition treaty with mainland China a few years ago. That would have been smart.
Well, look, what about, we could go on all night. Just a quick one on Taiwan.
Well, look, I think China is ramping up to exert maximum pressure on Taiwan. My guess would be, but there's no guarantee here, that it won't take direct military action because it's still scared of the Americans. But I think it will exert massive pressure on Taiwan, perhaps through blockades, perhaps through using its fifth column of citizens within Taiwan, perhaps through economic pressure. And it will try to get Taiwan to acknowledge Chinese leadership in its sovereignty over Taiwan or something like that. I don't think the Taiwanese will buckle to that, but this could get very, very tense. And I think it's unlikely that there'll be military conflict, but you certainly can't rule it out.
Well, just finally, PNG, a $40 billion industrial city at Daru, a major PNG seaport. As I said yesterday, I spoke with a distinguished Australian soldier who was one of a group of 8 charged with going in 2013 in little black rubber Zodiacs, they're these inflatable boats, from Daru to Weipa to see whether our border force, allegedly protecting our borders, would detect them and therefore intercept them. They had the job done in 3 days in inflatable boats. And China are going to build a $40 billion city there. What do we do?
Well, Alan, this is, again, a very grave development for Australia. My sources tell me that the Australian intelligence agencies believe that Beijing has an objective state policy to establish in time, a military base in the South Pacific. Now, if it did that, it would do to Australia what the Japanese did to Australia in World War II. It would partially cut us off militarily from our chief ally, the United States, and it would be able to project decisive military force right in our immediate neighbourhood. That would be a disastrous development for Australia. And
are we equal to addressing this at the moment?
That's a $64 million question. If we cannot remain the preeminent power and friend in the South Pacific, but I'd give Scott Morrison credit for this. I think he does recognise this challenge. If we can't do that, then we're in terrible trouble.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you, Greg. Always good to talk to you. Thank you for your time. There he is, Greg Sheridan, the foreign editor for the Australian newspaper.